Hi everybody, welcome back to the Reasons We Believe podcast. We really are just going to jump right into the content for this episode. The topic today is theism or belief in God is the best explanation for reality. And what we're going to talk about here probably will make a little more sense if you've already listened to episode 1. But nonetheless, I'm so glad you're here and we are just going to jump right on into it. Okay. So today we are unpacking and defending the claim that theism is the best explanation for reality. So let's unpack that for a little bit. We have to define what we mean by reality. Always good to define our terms. I actually want to talk a little bit about my first day of my philosophy class, which I took my first year of college. And I actually had a super interesting conversation on the first day of that class. And somebody asked right from the get-go, what is reality? I think my professor threw that word out or used it in a sentence, and somebody was like, hey, we should start by defining what we mean by reality. And I kind of want to do that here. And what a better place to start at in a philosophy class than reality, because reality is the basics. It's where we should start in these sort of discussions, because if you think about it, every conversation that we have is attempting to describe or say something about reality. And so in my philosophy class, we would all be exchanging ideas about reality, and I didn't contribute anything other than challenging other people's definitions, but I couldn't contribute anything to that question, what is reality? Because I was overthinking it, and it's sort of like when you know what something is, you know it. You're like, oh yeah, I just innately know what that is, until somebody asks you about it, describing the color blue. That's such a hard thing to do, even though blue is such a familiar concept. So in that class, we learned about this philosopher named St. Augustine, and I know there's different ways to say that. And he said, I know what time is until someone asks me what it is. And reality is sort of like time in that sense. It seems so simple, but when defining it, it gets complicated. And there were a ton of different definitions thrown around in class that day about what reality is. And a really one of the main sort of definitions that got thrown around in different variations was that reality is essentially what you experience. And that was one of the notions that I challenged. Our experiences can be deceiving because you might experience something that isn't there. If you've ever had sleep paralysis or have hallucinated for whatever reason, then you know what I'm talking about. You're experiencing something that feels very, I just got really far away from the mic. You're experiencing something that feels very rare, very real to you, but in reality, it's not actually there. So to give an example of this, imagine you're home alone, you are definitely home alone, and your mom is at the store, or maybe she's out of town. Let's just say you're home alone, your mom is out of town, and you hear her calling your voice from the garage. So what does this mean? Well, in reality, you had an experience where you thought you heard your mom's voice. But in objective reality, in the deeper sense, you didn't actually hear your mom's voice because she's not home. So this sort of illustrates, I hope, maybe that wasn't a clear example, how you can experience something that is part of reality in a sense, but on the deeper level, your experiences are not all of what makes up objective reality, because our experiences can be deceiving. Or think about a dream. You might have a dream that you're kayaking on a really beautiful lake, but you wake up and you realize, okay, that's not part of objective reality. Even though you experienced it very vividly in your dream, it's not a part of reality. So clearly, our experiences are not all that make up reality. Some others in my class said, there is no reality. Reality is what you make it. But this sort of seemed to fall short for the same reasons. So if you'd like to be introspective for a minute, maybe just consider, if someone were to ask you, hey, what is reality? What would you say to that? What is your current definition of reality? So maybe just think on that for a minute, and I'll share with you what I think is a perfectly logical definition of reality. It's super simple, and it comes from Greg Koukl, and he is an author and a podcast host over at Stand to Reason or str.org. If you're into any of the stuff that I'm talking about today, you would love Greg Koukl's work. He's a really big inspiration, so I'll be referencing him a lot in these episodes. But he says that reality is the way things really are. Period, Greg Koukl. That's so simple, and it makes so much sense. Reality is the way things objectively really are. It's not how you want them to be or what you think they are, but the way they really are. What I want to touch on now is sort of combating a lie, a huge, big, giant, prominent lie in culture. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that, like, I don't think reality is a mystery to us. At least at large, I think that reality is very knowable, if you will. And that is a very refreshing truth to adopt, and it should bring relief to us. There are obviously some parts of reality that are unknown and probably will always be unknown, like what lies at the bottom of the ocean, or what is really in outer space. We can only logically discover a fraction of all of that stuff because we've only explored so much of reality. But reality at large is indeed very known to us. And, we know many realities regarding the natural world. We know things like the composition of the atmosphere, what makes up our cells, what natural organisms need to survive. We know that we're not the only creatures roaming on Earth. And so we know many realities of our personal lives as well. Not just the natural world, natural organisms, but of our own personal individual lives. We know who our friends are, how many years we've been alive, and what we want for ourselves in the future. Obviously, so many parts of reality are observable and knowable, even if we are still discovering new things each and every day. So I hope that is clear, and that made sense. That's reality, the way things really are. But why is God the best explanation for the way things really are? And this is in part answered by the previous episode where we dove into the wonderful complexities and order of the universe that I am forever awestruck by. And so I think that based off of that, it is illogical to claim that all of this is here with no mind behind it. And that might still be a hard concept to accept or even consider for some people, and that's perfectly fair. Just remember, my goal is to never convert you or bring you into my little, frame of thinking, but just to get you to see, like, hey, my worldview, believing in God, actually might make more sense than you think it does. So today we're going to talk about the 3 bumps of reality. It's an idea that I came across when I was at a summer camp called Summit Ministries. It's an apologetic summer camp. I absolutely love Summit. So much of what I have learned and my passion for all this stuff has been sparked at Summit. I highly recommend it if you're interested in any of this stuff and you're within the ages of 16 to 25. You should absolutely go. It's a one-in-a-lifetime experience. Even if you are the most extreme atheist that you know of, you should go and challenge them and ask them really hard questions and see what you walk away with. So, I'm going to draw the conclusion based on the 3 bumps of reality that theism makes better sense of reality than atheism. So let's remember that theism is a belief in God and atheism is the rejection of, the existence of God. It's a rejection of God. The speaker for that afternoon at Summit Ministries who brought this idea up to mind was named John Noyes from Stand to Reason, and he claimed that there are 3 main bumps of reality that the atheists run into and cannot logically explain away. And so the theist, on the other hand, has reality as an ally. This is an idea that is going to be riddled throughout all of my episodes, that believing in God, if you are a theist, reality is on your side. And that's a big claim, and it's super offensive if you're an atheist. It's offensive not to you personally, but to your worldview. And I understand that, which is why I'm always going to try my best to back up my bold claims with as much evidence and reason as I can. Because I respect you guys, and I respect your intellect. Okay, so the 3 bumps are the bump of stuff, the bump of bad, and the bump of me. We're going to sort of briefly touch on the bump of stuff. What we're really going to spend the most time in today is the bump of bad. I really want to touch on the bump of bad because a lot of you guys are going to be able to relate to it, and I think that it might clear up a couple of mental guards that you have up in terms of theism. So let's dive into the bump of stuff. So the bump of stuff has to do with everything in the observable universe. There is something here. Okay, we're not surrounded by nothing, but the question is why? Why aren't we surrounded by something? Why is there something here rather than nothing? So there's only 2 logical options here. Something caused this stuff, the universe, to come into existence, or nothing caused it to come into existence. So I want you to imagine that you're at dinner with some friends. You're at a restaurant, you guys are enjoying your meal, and then all of a sudden, you hear this really loud boom from somewhere outside, and it disrupts everybody in the restaurant. And so you're immediately going to ask out loud to your friends, or at least within your own mind, Where did that come from? What just caused that gigantic boom noise? And you might phrase this question in different ways, but the bottom line here is that you know that sound had to come from something. Never would you assume that that loud boom was uncaused and came into existence randomly all on its own. And the same is true for the universe. As Greg Koukl puts it, the Big Bang needs a Big Banger. This is only logical, and atheism cannot explain where all of this stuff came from. How this grand, beautiful, full of order universe, that was a really badly phrased sentence, but you get the point. How all of this, which is full of order, even the most prominent atheists would agree with that claim. Our universe is full of order. So atheism cannot explain why there is something rather than nothing, like with a satisfactory answer, but theism can. According to theism, God made the observable universe. So we're going to leave that there. There is a whole different argument that goes hand in hand with the bump up stuff. It's called the Kalam cosmological argument, which I am going to do a whole episode on because it deserves its own episode. But in these first couple episodes, we're really just scratching the surface of ideas to sort of break the ice between me and my listeners, and to get you interested, to sort of help you figure out, is this podcast something I want to keep listening to? So that's why we're not getting too deep into these ideas here, but we are going to spend a bit more time on the next bump, which is the bump of bad. So we're going to get pretty philosophical here, so hang with me, but I know you're going to be able to relate to this bit really, really well. Okay, so I'd like you to pause and think about a time in your life when you asked yourself the question, why is this happening to me? When are things going to get better? Maybe this has to do with a loved one passing away, or a relationship that you were really hoping to work out, not working out, and maybe even ending after years of commitment, an opportunity you really were hoping to line up that didn't, or a job that was going really well, but then things all of a sudden went very south. And we all experience these things. We all experience these things in life. Being let down and experiencing hardship is a part of the human experience. Absolutely nobody on this planet Earth is going to get away with that. Sorry, if you're a newborn and you're listening to this, you got some hard things coming your way, baby. All right, so some of us start to question, when these things happen to us, why does the world operate this way? Why do good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people? Why is there evil in the world at all? The problem of evil is a huge problem for both the atheist and the theist. And I'm going to explain what I mean by this, but I want you to remember that. This is called the problem of evil, and it's a problem for atheists and theists alike. It's a problem for the atheists because they have to somehow explain away how morality can exist in a world that has no true value. If atheism is true, then people don't have true value. We are all walking accidents. No one designed us. No one put us here on purpose with objective value. We just simply happen to be here. So it doesn't matter how people are treated, because it's only worth treating people well if people are worth something. In a world where everyone's opinion is against the other, who ultimately gets to say what's right or wrong. And this is how the world operates in an atheistic worldview. Morality is just an opinion, and you can say that we give ourselves value or we give other people value by how we treat them and love them, but by that logic, the second somebody treats somebody else bad or judges them harshly in their mind, or the second you treat yourself bad or look down upon yourself and belittle yourself, all your value goes away, because all it is an opinion. And, in a world where our perception of ourselves and others define value, the moment we perceive someone as worthless, they become worthless. Unless value and morality come from an objective source. But the atheist has nowhere substantial or objective to turn to in terms of morality. So let me put this into perspective. We all know that what happened during the Holocaust was absolutely horrible and evil and morally wrong. The taking of millions of innocent lives is wrong, and if somebody, like Hitler, disagrees, we don't look at them and say, hey, that's your opinion, and you can believe that if you want, which is the claim the atheist has to be okay with, because morality is just an opinion. If you live in an atheistic worldview, there is no objective standard for morality. Where did that come from? I asked to the atheist. And so somebody like Hitler fails to see that the taking of millions of innocent lives is wrong. Even though he fails to see that it's wrong, it's still wrong. That's what objective morality means. Regardless of opinion and perception, it stands firm. Taking of innocent lives on the basis of race and religion is wrong. But the question, of course, isn't whether or not that's wrong. The question is why it's wrong. Where does this perception of wrong come from? The atheist does have a couple of options if they are posed with this question. And a lot of people say, I draw my morals from society. Whatever the law of the land says or whatever most people say is right and wrong is what I go by. And sometimes society has fantastic moral standards and laws like, punishment for murder and laws against theft and, women's rights, that women can vote, that they are equal as men in terms of their rights and their perceived value in society. But it's so clear, abundantly clear, to see that society gets morality wrong all the time. Like all the time. But the main issue is this. Society's moral standards are constantly changing. Consider things like laws on gay marriage or abortion, child marriage, interracial marriage, the age of consent. These are laws that have they've changed, at least within our own country of America. These laws have changed as our perception of morality has changed. Gay marriage used to be illegal and it's now legal because society has changed its mind and said, gay marriage is acceptable and we're going to reflect that in our laws. And I'm not taking a stance on any of these laws right now. I'm just simply illustrating examples of how our ideas of morality has changed and how it's reflected in our laws. But the thing is that morality isn't changing. It's constant. From the beginning of time, it has always been wrong to take an innocent life. It has always been wrong to torture someone for fun. It's always been wrong to cheat when you're in a committed relationship. And morality is objective. It doesn't sway. This is a law of the universe. It's a way the world operates, just like a physical law. A physical law describes something about the physical world, and the moral law also describes something about our universe, not physically, but it determines how we operate ourselves and function our physical bodies. Morality doesn't depend on society's standards or somebody's individual opinion. What Hitler did to the Jews was evil. Even though most atheists would agree with you, they have no reason for doing that, because in a world with no God, there is no value. People don't matter objectively, where everyone exists based on mere chance, and morality is just an opinion. It would simply be your opinion that what the Nazis did to millions of Jews was wrong. The atheist has nowhere substantial or objective to turn to ground their moral beliefs. And this isn't me looking at the atheist and saying, hey, you can't behave morally. The atheists can absolutely behave morally, and they should, and I think that they would agree with me on that. But I'm just saying, if this is you, if you are an atheist and you believe in behaving morally, just ask yourself why you think that way. Where does your sense of morality come from? This isn't me attacking your worldview. It's just pointing out how I see it to be inconsistent. Like I said, the atheist has moral beliefs. We all do. We all have these moral laws written in our subconscious. I can never say that word right. I always get it confused. Consciousness, conscientious, subconscious. I think it's subconscious. We're going to go with that. We have these moral laws written on our heart. There we go. On our subconscious. I was trying to stay away from religious verbiage, but written on your heart just flows out the tongue better. There is a reason why we feel guilt after we commit a wrongdoing against someone, and why we feel so much better after they forgive us. But atheism can't make sense of this. It can't make sense of why we feel this way innately. But can theism explain away where these moral standards come from? And I would argue strongly that it can. In a world where there is a God who ascribes inherent value to each human being, who are purposely placed here, he placed each of us here and loves us, there is reason to behave morally. People matter. There's a standard now, an objective standard, where we can draw our moral code. So let's go back to a point I touched on in the first episode, but look at it in a little bit of a different way. We know that information always comes from a mind. And a moral law is like information. Our moral code informs us of what is right and wrong. But who created those laws? Who created those moral laws? And what the theist can do is say, well, God did. God created those moral laws. He is the objective moral lawgiver. And laws always need a lawgiver, just like information needs a mind. Now, to wrap up the bump of bad, I'm going to lay out a simple argument. I've know I spent a lot of time here. Thank you so much for sticking with me if you're still listening. So this argument may not suffice and it may seem too simple for you, which I totally understand, because while I do love things that are simple and straight to the point, sometimes it's necessary when you're getting so philosophical to dive deep into things. But this argument makes perfect sense to me. It's called the moral argument for God, and it goes like this. Okay, first premise. If God does not exist, then objective moral values do not exist. But objective moral values do exist. Therefore, God exists. So we certainly know that at least some things are objectively morally wrong. I've already listed some examples like the Holocaust, and the list could go on. I'm sure you can think of a ton of things that are objectively wrong just right now. And if somebody fails to see that they're wrong, like failing to see murdering someone is wrong, and so they adapt very harmful behaviors, what do we do with that person? We get them help, because that is a reflection that something is psychologically or emotionally wrong with them. We don't dismiss it and just say, oh, that's just their belief, let them be, their truth is as valid as anyone else's. No, we get them help because we recognize something is wrong with this person's brain. And I don't say that to be offensive. Like, that's how we look at people when they adopt those morally wrong beliefs and attitudes. So I'd argue strongly that objective morality does exist, and logically we must have a standard by which we measure morality, or else it's just an opinion. I believe that God offers the perfect standard of morality because, by definition, God is a morally perfect being. At least the God that I believe in. I think that maybe that wasn't a super fair claim for me to make, because if you let's look up definition of God. Definition of God. Let's see what Google says, because I just made the claim. Okay, there's the Christian definition, but we'll just do the general. A superhuman being or spirit worshipped as having power over nature and human fortunes as a deity. Okay, but the Christian version says, the creator and ruler of the universe and source of all moral authority. So if we get into the specifics, we can say, yes, God is a morally perfect being, but I guess I probably shouldn't make the claim that by definition, he is a morally perfect being. I guess a better way to explain this would just be to say that, God is the objective moral lawgiver. He is where the laws come from. If God is real, then we have a reason to believe in objective morality, because he sets the pace for what is right and wrong. He is objective. He calls the shots. And so, yeah, maybe that's a bit of a better way to make that claim. Okay, so I know we've spent a lot of time here, and we are about to move on to the last bump, the bump of me. But I made a claim earlier that I first need to address. I said that the problem of evil is a problem for atheists and theists alike, and it's a problem for the atheists because in a world where we all know objective moral standards very much so exist, the atheist has nowhere substantial to turn to as to where those standards come from. They can't explain away why it's here or how we can measure it, but it's also a problem for the theist in that if objective morality exists and God exists, why is there still so much evil in the world? If God is all-powerful, good, and just, and loving, why doesn't he just snap his fingers and take all of the evil out of the world? Doesn't he care about us? And we are going to get to that question and that answer in an episode in the very near future. We're not going to touch on it today because we need to spend more time there. That is an issue that has been a real stumbling block for me, and I believe for many atheists and theists alike. If, there is a good and loving God, why is the universe the way that it is? Even if God can explain away why morality is here, and even if objective morality makes the most sense if God exists, why is there still evil if God is good? That has probably been one of the most challenging questions I've asked myself and been asked in my entire life. So that's why we're not going to answer it in a couple of minutes. It's going to get its own episode. So we're going to put a pin in that. Okay. All right, last bump of me. Let's make sure. Oh my gosh, this is getting so long. Okay. The bump of me. What does this mean? You, my friend, are an amazing creation. You have a brain that functions logically and coherently most of the time. And if you're able to make sense of anything in this podcast, then you have a functioning logical brain, okay? I think you're set. You have DNA, extremely complex information that tells your body how to survive and to continue to function and develop. You have a body that is designed in a way that is completely synchronized. Each layer from organ to cell is detailed and designed for a purpose. I took an anatomy class in my freshman year of college. My freshman year was just an eye-opening experience for me. I took philosophy, I took anatomy, big time in my life. But I just oh my gosh, anatomy is my favorite subject. It just the human body has so many mechanisms that to me just scream, there is a designer, there is a God. Something as simple as a red blood cell, if the shape of your red blood cells, which are usually discs, if they are sickle-shaped, sickle cell anemia, then literally your whole body can be thrown off course. You will get fatigued, your muscles will be swelling, and you can have vision problems. So your body is designed for balance. Every little detail down to the round shape of your red blood cells, it's there on purpose. So anyways, that's just a little science lesson for us. But the bottom line is, if you look at yourself, your eyes, your organs, you can't really look at that, but you get the point. You are literally a walking masterpiece. I just want you to see that, take it as a compliment if you must. You are a walking masterpiece. You are a reflection of your grand designer. Consider how the atheist Richard Dawkins defines biology. He says it's the study of complicated things that give the appearance of being designed for a purpose. What if you appear designed because you are designed? But that's your physical body. I want to talk about the non-physical. We're going to talk about the mind. What if I told you, so I'm telling you, if I told you to imagine a lush green grassy field with little Highland cows roaming about in it, you could do that. You can see that in your mind right now. Perhaps even if I told you to think about the scent of fresh grass, you could sort of start smelling it. And that isn't because the right chemicals in your brain are mixing to produce those sensations. At least that's not all there is to it. It's not something that you can boil down to the material realm. Your imagination is strong and vivid, and that's not something that naturalism can explain away. Your mind, your brain is part of the material realm, but your mind is not. Your imagination is not part of the material realm. You are more than your material body, and I think that your mind and your imagination is proof of that. Now, this is one of my favorite things to think about. We're almost done. I'm almost done talking your ear off. I'm acting like people keep listening to this even if they don't want to. I'm sure if you're sick of hearing me, you're just going to turn it off. But this is sort of an idea that I came across recently that I just love it. The fact that you can think doesn't make sense if atheism is true. So there is a brilliant mathematician and scientist. His name is John Lennox, and he talks about a conversation that he has with some of his atheist friends. So what he does is he asks them, what do you do your science with? Points to his brain just to make it clear what he's talking about. And, they say, well, the brain. And so John Lennox says, okay, tell me about your brain. Give me a short history of your brain. And the atheist will say to him, well, my brain is the end product of a mindless, unguided process, which is evolution. They might not use those exact words, but evolution is a mindless, unguided process. And so he says to them, and you trust it. To elaborate more on this, he asks them, if you knew that the computer you use every day in your lab was the product of a mindless, unguided process, would you use it? And they always say a resounding no. Yet by that same logic, they trust their brain. The bottom line here is that if atheism is true, then all humans are the result of an unguided, mindless process. We evolved from a single-celled organism. You shouldn't be able to trust your own brain if that's true. It would simply be a structure of fizzing chemicals, and it shouldn't be able to produce coherent thoughts, but it can. Your thoughts that you have every day are in line with reality. You interact with others based on what you know to be morally true. You treat them well, and you get ready within a time frame that realistically allows you to get to work on time because your brain is logical. This doesn't make sense in atheism. It would be a miracle for atheism to be true, with humans having as complex of a mind as they do. It'd be a miracle. But theism makes perfect sense of this reality. In theism, God designed the human mind in his likeness. He installed it, if you will, with his logic and reason. In theism, our minds are a design. They're not the end product of a mindless, unguided process. So maybe after listening to all of this, you still think that atheism is logical, and maybe that it can even make sense of the three bumps of reality. But perhaps now you can see why theism also makes sense. I'd argue that theism makes more sense, but it's okay if we aren't on the same page right now. Regardless of where you stand, thank you so much for listening to this episode, especially if you're somebody that knows me personally. I just want to say thank you so much. And if you have any questions, you can drop them in the description, in the comments below. You can DM me if you know me. You are more than welcome to text me about any of this. Ask me any questions you have. It ended up being a little bit longer than I expected, but sometimes that happens when you're talking about this kind of stuff. In the next episode, it'll be a lot shorter. We're going to dive into why theism has the answers to life's three biggest questions and ultimately offers comfort and hope for humanity. Thank you so much for listening to Reasons We Believe, and I'll see you next time.